In honor of reaching 50 video essays on the channel today, I figured I'd give you one of the greatest video essays I've ever made in a while. Today, I'm going to be going into how to raise chickens from their very beginning, baby chickens. Let's get into this. And don't forget to like and subscribe before you get in, because you'll see some cool videos on your feed pretty much daily until the school year begins. We'll not get into that for your sake, so let's get into it. The first step to raising baby chickens is understanding the situation that you're in. So basically what I'm talking about is the setting of the area that you live in. So basically if you're living in the middle of nowhere on like a 25-acre lot, then it's more likely than not that you can just go right ahead and buy some chickens, no issue. But if you live in the suburbs, then I'd highly recommend consulting with the local people in your town, because they'll help you they'll tell you if you can get chickens or not. And if you can't get chickens, then that's kind of the end of the story. But if you can indeed get chickens, then we can continue talking about them. Now in this next bit, I'm going to be talking about choosing that proper breed of chicken. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go fully in depth with every single thing because, well, there's kind of a series on this channel that I do like every year talking about the greatest breeds of chickens. But if you didn't catch my video that I made, I think last week, about the greatest first chicken, I recommended you 3 specific breeds, but one in particular stood out from the rest. The Easter egger. It's a really cheap chicken, usually around $6 to $10 per piece, which if you get a lot, that can potentially be a big cost, but in general, they're not that expensive. But most notably, we also had the Barred Rocks and Buff Orpingtons as the runners-up in that list. So I'd recommend those are the 3 ones you can get, but there's also tons of other ones. If you want to up your game a little bit, get some Black Hopper Marins. They're a bit more expensive though. They can cost you as much as $60 sometimes, but for the most part they're like $15, $20. You can also get yourself some Wyandottes, although those are kind of the ones I put on my least favorite chicken breeds video, but at the same time, they can potentially be pretty useful to those who want them. Now, the next thing's next, what we should be doing is we should be buying the essentials that we need for our baby chickens. Now, exactly what are those essentials you can go shopping for, and where exactly can I buy all those essentials? Is some questions I could definitely hear you guys asking in the comments or anywhere. The greatest place, in my opinion, is gotta be Tractor Supply. Runners up is Walmart, and you could probably go to any local store and find some of these things. But the first thing that you're gonna really need is a brooder, because you can't just throw your baby chickens on the floor and expect them to live there. No, they're not. They're going to dirty up your floor, and if you get them in the spring, it's going to be really cold on that floor potentially as well. So that's why I'd recommend a brooder. To put in that brooder, you want to get some shavings and also a heat lamp. However, I'd recommend looking up a lot of tutorials about how to use a heat lamp, because they could potentially cause some pretty serious injuries if they're handled improperly. So heat lamps are one of the biggest things. A feeder and a waterer. The feeder is what's going to hold all the feed, and you don't want it to be big unless you have a lot of chickens. And the waterer should be a bit smaller when they're baby chickens, but once they get to like 9 to 10 weeks old, you can probably get it a bit, not even then, like 6 weeks old. You can get them a bigger waterer to put in their flock, because I think it's really useful to have all that sort of stuff. So how much money is this all in general? Yeah, like $150 if you find it cheap. But I'd recommend getting some better things for your chickens as well. As for the feed, I just recommend getting some chick feeder. We usually get the same ones at the store every time, and they're pretty inexpensive for the most part. Now next up, we got some really basic facts that I think in general are really important that you need to know when you're going to be raising baby chickens. So the first big fact is what the brooder temperature should be and what you should be decreasing it to every single week. So, on that first week, you want that brooder temperature to be set to 90 degrees. Now, you really want to move up the heat lamp a little bit in the brooder so that way it gets a little bit cooler. So by 5 degrees every week. So by week 6, it should be, I believe, like 65 or something like that degrees. I'll put the actual temperature on screen right now for the sake of it, because why not? But at the end of the day, though, that's one of the most important things you need to know if you're going to be not feeding them in general, but just like raising them. Next, speaking of feeding them, you should be filling up their feeder about once a day, cleaning their brooder at least every other day, but sometimes if they're messy, you might have to do it more than once a day, which can be really, really annoying, especially if you have a busy schedule. Like some people I know do have a busy schedule, and they don't really want to maintain all that. Alright, so next up, now we gotta do is pick up those chickens. And really on that day, usually if you get your first chickens, I'd highly recommend getting them from a private breeder, as those guys have the highest chance of course, being successful and choosing between hen and rooster. If they them correctly, I'm probably gonna beep that out in the editing because, well, it's not the greatest word to use in this terminology, but it is accurate. And I will say that if they get it wrong, a lot of commercial breeders do that, but a lot of the private breeders are a whole lot better with getting this information accurate. And trust me, bro, you want that information as accurate as possible, because if you're a first-time chicken owner, I don't recommend roosters. Second time, third time, then we can talk. But first time, yeah, no thank you, I wouldn't recommend you a rooster. Especially considering just how obnoxious they could be. Roosters could be your biggest op. They could be your enemy. They could be the biggest moron you've ever seen in your life. Trust me. Now, all you gotta do is welcome them to their brand new and humble abode. It's really, really simple. All you gotta do is gently take them out of the box that they're in and gently place them into their brand new brooder. Now, in there, you wanna make sure it's already prepared for them because they are gonna be causing a bit of a mess. And you wanna make sure they're placed as close to the heat lamp as possible. It's really important that you know that, because if they scatter, then it could potentially cause a ton, and I mean a ton, of issues in there. Now, next up, I really, really think you should know this. This little piece of information right here is really important to know. Before you name them, if you're going to name them at all, that would be, don't, and I mean do not name them on that first night, because you never know. You could be naming your chicken, you could be cooking up the most creative name ever, and then the next morning you come into that brooder, and the chicken has sadly passed on. And there's two main reasons why this happens. Reason number one, the chicken just wasn't really suited to live. It just wasn't really there. It wasn't really suited to live. It had a deformity. It was like damaged during the shipping process. Or reason number two, it wasn't in that heat lamp. So that's why you really got to be checking on them as much as possible during this time period. Now, I'll keep this section pretty short and simple, but yes, naming your chickens is something that a lot of people do, especially if you're going to have pet chickens. I'd recommend, if you're going to have different types of chickens, make sure to only name the most important ones or the ones you think are really, really important. And just remember, you don't have to name them all at one time. There's not a whole lot of pressure for that. You're just naming chickens, bro. It's not that deep. So come up with the most creative names. If you want to learn more about creating your great chicken name, be sure to check the video out in the iCard above. I might end up remaking that one sometime before the end of the summer, so as I said, turn on notifications. You might see some crazy stuff here. And now I'm about to show you exactly how you should be cleaning the brooder. Now, this is really, really simple, and this goes without saying. First things first, you can leave the chickens in there, just make sure that they're away from the main action that you're doing. Then you want to scoop out the shavings and apply new ones in there at the same time, so that way the chickens can go to the new ones. But first of all, like I said, I'm pretty sure I need to reiterate this because in the script I messed it up a little bit. Remove the waterer and the feeder because, well, you don't want that to get all caught up with the brand new shavings because, you know, it adds a lot to them. And also, really simply, to basic care, I'm going to add this section too. I wanted to add this in a different section, but I'll just put it right here. Basic care, replace their waterer at least 2 times a day and replace their feeder at least once a day. And check on them like at least 6 to 10 times a day because it'll really help them, especially if they're in an area of your house you don't usually go into. Most people's first chickens are in their house, but a lot of people put them in their shed or their barn if they have to. Just make sure that it's nice and warm in there and do tests before you get them. Now, I think it's important that we should note this really quickly. This is just going to be like a quick, maybe 1 or 2 section long segment of this video, but I think it's best to say, keep the pets away from your chickens, especially dogs and cats and other similar things that could potentially put your chickens in harm's way, especially cats, because you never know. Cats are way more swift than dogs. Like, I have a cat named Cricket. She's like 2 years old, so she's still technically a kitten, probably not, but I wouldn't ever trust her anywhere near baby chickens. I barely trust her around my full-grown chickens. Well, I can mostly trust her because she usually just tries to play pranks on them and doesn't actually have any grudges against them. Maybe the chickens have grudges against the cat, but maybe not the cat against the chickens. But dogs, I'd recommend keeping them out of there unless you have like a really gentle dog that you know for a 100% proven fact isn't going to cause any bodily harm to the chickens. Like my Great Dane Fez, I would probably trust around the chickens. Maybe not unsupervised. Never trust pets unsupervised around your baby chickens, but I'd probably trust him around them at least. My puppy Linguini, absolutely not. Stay away from the chickens. The chickens would probably put a restraining order on the puppy if they could. Now, this is the perfect time, and I mean the perfect time, to tell exactly how good the breeders did at the chickens from birth. Here's exactly how to tell if your chicken is a hen or a rooster. Usually at around 2 to 3 weeks old is when they start showing the first signs of either being a hen or a rooster. If it's a hen, they're growing along, they're the average size amongst the rest of the chickens, and they barely have a comb, their feathers are developing pretty steadily. But then if you have the rooster over there on the other side of the room, he is much bigger. Like, I mean, a lot bigger than just your ordinary chicken. Like, he is a lot bigger, he's heavier, and he's bigger in every aspect. And if he was falcon, bro, he'd be probably shaped the same as a McDonald's burger. Alright, that was unfunny, I don't care. But at the same time, though, you can also kind of hear a very, very terrible crow coming from in there. That crow is their first attempt at one. It will get better, trust me, unless you're my rooster falcon, whose crow literally stayed the same his whole life. And no, that's not even meant to be a jab at him because he wasn't really the greatest rooster. Rest in peace, falcon. You will technically kind of be missed. But what really, really, really was interesting was that he never crowed until like 19 weeks old. And when he did begin crowing, his crow stuck for him for the rest of his life. I don't know what happened there, to be honest. Now, knowing the signs before you should allow your chickens outside is absolutely crucial. First of all, the brooder temperature should be equivalent roughly to the outdoors temperature consistently. So if you got them in March, there's a good chance, especially if you're from the Northeast like me, that you'll probably let them out usually around 1st or 2nd week of May. I remember May 2nd, 2020 was the first time we let our pet flock outside. It was a nice 70-degree day, and it was perfect for them because they're fully feathered. Just so you know, if they're fully feathered, this rule doesn't really apply anymore. You can just throw them outside at that point. But I would be a little bit cautious, especially if it's like in the fall. You know, those chickens could potentially be subject to potential hypothermia, if you know. Well, basically, at that point, if the brooder temperature matches the outdoors temperature, they're fully feathered or mostly feathered, and their peeping sound is getting a bit deeper, they're a little bit more messy, they have like that messy look kind of, then yeah, they could probably let them outside for short periods of the day. I'd recommend getting a fence that you're going to put them in and monitoring them very closely, because you do not want that red-tailed hawk that's flying above there to snatch himself a nice little 10-piece chicken McNugget. Well, now it is officially time that you should have a coop out there for them. You can either build one or buy one. I'd recommend that if you buy one, you at least add a couple modifications onto that chicken coop, or at least invite someone over to your house that knows how to do modifications to add them to your chicken coop, because especially if you buy the cheaper ones, they're not going to be of the highest quality. Especially if like they haven't been put up to a test by like coyotes or whatever before. But if you build one yourself, you kind of have that stamp of authenticity on it. Basically, you know for a fact that that chicken coop is strong and it can defend against a whole lot of stuff trying to break into it at the middle of the night. That is exactly what building a chicken coop does to one. So basically, if you don't know how to build one, here's a quick little checklist. You should also look up some tutorials or invite someone over, as I said, that knows how to build it. Here's a quick little checklist. The chicken coop should have good ventilation, a good door that's really strong and sturdy, and something that the raccoon can't really open. If you check at least those 3 boxes off, you're pretty much good to go for a pretty strong chicken coop. Of course, you can add layers to reinforce it and keep it cool during the summer, and most importantly, you can also add an automatic chicken coop door so you don't have to go out there at 6 in the morning to let them out. The automatic door does that job for you, my friend. Now, next things next is perfect to move them outside, especially after they got adjusted to the outdoors, and at that point they pretty much are fully feathered. I'd recommend them being completely feathered, and at least I'd say like 12 weeks old for the chickens to be outside full time. And also, when you move them into that chicken coop that first night, you really, really, really want to make sure they stay in that coop for about 2 to 3 days. That's a rookie mistake I see a lot of new chicken owners doing, because they feel like it's just like trapping them in there. It's going to get them used to that chicken coop. So when you actually let them out into the great unknown, or whatever they want to call it, you can basically know for a fact that the chickens are going to come back at night And I recommend not free arranging them until you get a little bit older with the chickens. Or, I mean, you could just throw them outside and watch what happens. I mean, I don't really care. It's your chickens, not mine. But at the end of the day, I don't free arrange my chickens for a specific reason like that. Now that they're outside, it's now best to just continue your journey until they begin laying eggs, which happens at roughly, I'd say, like 18 to 24 weeks old. Given around that time is when your chickens will begin laying eggs. I do also think it's noteworthy that those first couple eggs are going to be really small. It's going to take a lot to match your normal egg breakfast, and it's going to be a little while before it can scratch eggs completely off your shopping list. But at the same time, you're still enjoying some nice and fresh eggs that taste arguably better than the ones at the store. If you enjoyed and you want to see more like this, click the subscribe button, and more importantly, the playlist in the center of the screen has, of course, 50 videos like this one, just for your eyes to enjoy. And I'll see you in one of those videos. Catch you later. Bye.